Hi everybody, welcome to my intuitive living series. Today's video is on 5 tips to a healthy relationship with food. So let's get into it. Tip number 1, make peace with food. This principle is really important, and what it means is that you believe that there are no good foods and no bad foods. And this might seem kind of crazy to you because that's all we're taught in our culture is that these are foods that are good for you, these are foods that are bad for you. But it's important to recognize that there is not one food that has the power to destroy your health or to build your health. There's not one food that has the power to make you fat or help you become slim. We can't single out foods and place them in good and bad categories. It's important to know that there's no clean foods because food is not dirty. Food is just food, and it really is helpful and most important to be able to equalize all foods in our minds. So obviously, as a dietitian, I recognize that foods are not all nutritionally equal, and there are different things that we can get out of different foods, but food is all morally equal, meaning that there are not you're not a better person for eating one food over the other and not a worse person for eating certain foods. If you tell yourself you can't or shouldn't have a particular kind of food, it could lead to uncontrollable cravings and sometimes binging. So it's really important to make sure to equalize all foods and help yourself feel like you can have any food at any time that you feel like it, because otherwise it could lead to uncontrollable eating. Giving yourself unconditional permission to eat. That means that you are able to eat all kinds of foods when you feel like it, and that you're okay with that, and you're able to eat those things without judgment. You're not making conditions like, okay, well, I'll eat this cheesecake if I diet tomorrow. Or I can eat this cinnamon roll as long as I run it off tonight, or whatever. Those are giving yourself conditions on eating those foods, and we want to be able to give ourselves unconditional permission to eat. Now that might sound really scary to some people, especially if you've had a history of dieting throughout your life. But when you're able to make those unconditional permission to eat, you're able to equalize all foods, and there's not a push and pull, all or nothing mentality around food. So, tip number 2, honor your hunger and your fullness. This is really important. This is a power that we are all born with. If you've ever seen a baby eat, babies know how to eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full, and there's no judgment around that. But as we grow up through time, because of our culture, environment, family, we have all these influences that make us question our hunger and fullness, don't trust it, turn it off, ignore it. And so you want to be able to tap back into that if you have become disconnected from your hunger and fullness. If you are honoring your hunger and fullness, you should be eating about every 2 to 3 hours. So what that looks like is like a breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, and night snack. Eating about every 2 to 3 hours is most biological for our bodies by the time our bodies process foods. So if you aren't eating that frequently, then it might be time to think about how you are eating at the moment. And maybe you are eating a lot, or like overeating at your meals and making you not so hungry in that 2 to 3 hour time frame. Or maybe you are detached from your hunger cues. Maybe that's something that you have separated or distanced yourself from throughout the years. Don't underestimate breakfast. Breakfast is super important. You know that age-old saying, breakfast is the most important meal of the day? Because it is. It really sets the foundation for the rest of your eating day. It's hard to imagine that breakfast has that much of a power, but it really does. And I know I've heard a lot of people say like, well, I don't eat breakfast because I'm just not hungry. Well, there's a lot of explanations for that, but breakfast is still really important. And if you notice that you have a lot of cravings in the afternoon or eating, or you graze throughout the day, it's probably an indication that you're not eating enough at the beginning of the day. So really make that a priority. It's super important to be able to get your metabolism going and processing food for the rest of the day. So make sure that you are doing that. Honoring your fullness is really important, and I think that's something that a lot of people just blaze on right through. Some of the reasons that we don't honor our fullness are mindlessness, so being really distracted at meals, not thinking about our food, just kind of eating, but watching TV, playing on our phones, doing, whatever. Not making peace with food. So if you are eating something that you don't usually eat, then we tend to overeat on that because then you feel like, oh, I don't know when the next time is that I'm going to have this thing. Feeling like you have to clean your plate, that's also an issue, because if you feel like you have to clean your plate, then you might eat more than your fullness. And lastly, letting yourself get ravenously hungry can lead to overeating past your fullness. So make sure that you don't do those things so that you can really pay attention to your fullness and stop when you are full. Which leads me into tip number 3, be mindful. This is super important because mindfulness allows us to really pay attention to our bodies and be present. Our body is constantly trying to give us signals and communicate with us, and we need to be able to listen to our bodies so that we can do what it's asking us to do. So mindfulness is about tuning in, being present, being aware, and especially while you're eating, like I mentioned before, eating without distractions, which can be hard sometimes. Now, I'm not talking about not talking to people. We can still have conversations, and obviously we have a lot of us have kids and families, and that can be difficult to not be distracted by that. But definitely eliminating the TV as a distraction, eliminating your phone as a distraction, not reading while we're eating, because we really want to be able to listen to our body and pay attention to what's going on. Slowing down at meals is really important for you to increase your mindfulness. That's really going to help you to be able to be aware of what's going on. And if you're not eating slowly, then you're probably not paying attention to your body. A lot of times people will scoop their bite of food, put it in their mouth, and already be scooping the next bite of food before they're done chewing or swallowing this bite of food. So they're not even thinking about what's in their mouth because they're thinking about what's on the fork right now. So slow down. One thing that can help with this is to take a few deep breaths before you begin your meal. So you're not just going from cooking to just blazing right on through your meal. You're separating the moment and the experience by slowing down. Also important to pay attention to all 5 senses. That's a really great way to be mindful and to pay attention to what's going on in your body. So think about, how does the food smell? How does the food taste? Does the taste change as I chew it? What's the texture of the food? What's the temperature of the food? And do I like the texture-temperature combination? Do I like how this food is prepared? Thinking about maybe what sounds does this food make as I chew it? So there, you can really tap into all 5 senses as you are eating to help you really immerse yourself in the eating experience. You will find that you will be so much more satisfied with your meal. You'll be able to tell when you're shifting from hunger to fullness and be able to appropriately stop when you're adequately full and not feel deprived because you've really been immersed in the eating experience. Tip number 4, cope with your emotions with kindness. So let's talk about emotional eating. This is something that is actually really common, and there's a lot of shame around it. So let me give you a little example of what emotional eating is like. So if you hold your breath for 2 minutes and then you start gasping for air afterwards, nobody is going to accuse you of binge breathing, because it's a natural response to when your body doesn't have enough of what it needs. It will kind of breathe to catch up to where it needs to be. So the same thing happens when there is a food restriction, whether physically restricting of not eating it or mentally restricting of telling yourself you shouldn't be eating it while you are. This can trigger loss of control around food, which can feel a lot like emotional eating. So this is really important to recognize. If this is something that you feel like you have a problem with, then maybe consider if there are things that you are restricting from your menu that you need to normalize in order to not have this push and pull. So have compassion on yourself with that and know that this is something that you can work through. Also, recognize that eating for comfort or eating when we're emotional is a normal part of being human. We are emotional beings, and it's almost impossible to not have emotions while we're eating. So, have compassion on that and understand that it's okay to be eating when we're excited and happy and even sad and need comfort. That's totally fine. It can start getting to be a problem if this is something that's happening frequently or regularly, like several times a week or every weekend. Things like that can help you really recognize that maybe you're not recognizing or treating your emotions in the way that they need to be treated and to feel like your needs are met. So it's important to tell the difference between your physical hunger and your emotional hunger. Physical hunger is, well, first of all, you can use the 2 to 3 hours as a guide. So you can say, did I eat within 2 to 3 hours? And if I did, what did that look like? And was I eating enough? What did I eat, and is it enough to really tie me over till my next meal or snack? So that can help be a guide. And emotional hunger is something that comes on really sudden, and it's a really specific craving usually, and there's kind of an urgency behind it, like I have to have this right now. However, with physical hunger, it's something that comes on more slowly, and it's not necessarily a specific craving, but there's a lot of different things that you could eat, and it's not as urgent. However, if you do let yourself go too long without eating, there is going to be that urgency. So if you find that you are experiencing emotional hunger, find really kind ways to comfort yourself, nurture yourself, distract yourself, or resolve whatever's going on. If you are feeling sad, maybe you need to call a friend and cry it out. Maybe you need to watch a sad movie to just really feel those feels. Really treat what you are actually feeling and experiencing so that you can feel like your needs are met. Because the fact of the matter is, if you're feeling those emotions and you eat food, food is not going to solve or resolve those issues. It might make you feel good in the short term, but those emotions, stresses, anxieties are still going to be there when you're done eating. Tip number 5 is seek for balance and variety. So really making sure that you're staying away from extremes, not cutting out food groups, not eliminating foods that you don't feel like you should be eating, making sure you're having a balance in all things. Also not cutting out really fun foods and treats that you love, because if you cut them out, like we said earlier, then there could be potential for eating a lot more of those, and that's not balanced at all. So really make sure that you're paying attention to all foods, making sure that you are getting all different kind of nutrients and experiences in food so that you're eating what you love, loving what you eat, and eating so that you feel good. So those are my 5 tips for having a good and positive relationship with food. And let me know if you have any questions.